We need it. And I think, it's not going to happen overnight, but I think the more noise and voice we put behind a push for a federal paid leave policy, I think will really push that envelope.
Hello, everyone. This is Samantha Saxby with another episode of Moms with Benefits, and I am here with Akiko. Akiko is married. She has 2 children, and she is the founder of Maternity Leave 411, which also means she's self-employed. And we are going to talk with her on her journey into parenthood, how that reflected into her Maternity Leave 411 company that she started. And then we're going to do a deep dive into the California leave law landscape. And so, Akiko, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. Excited to be here.
So, before we get started, tell me a little bit about Maternity Leave 411, a company that you have founded.
So yeah, Maternity Leave 411, I help parents, birthing parents and non-birthing parents navigate and maximize their parental leave in California. In addition to helping individual employees, I also help employers develop parental leave policies as well as help them manage and administer an employee's leave so that that employee is getting the accurate amount of time and really helping their employees maximize their parental leave. In terms of how I started my business, I love telling the story because it really started out as a passion project. In 2014, when my older daughter was born, I went out on maternity leave and my employer just botched my leave. They basically shortchanged my leave by 8 weeks. I'm super type A personality. I had done a bunch of research, so I knew they were wrong. And despite a lot of inefficient back and forth, they weren't kind of understanding why they were wrong. And it wasn't malicious. I think that the HR rep that I was speaking to, she was only kind of trained on federal FMLA. And she wasn't aware of how the California leave laws, how they interplay with federal FMLA. And so I think that's where the shortchanging came about. Long story short, I have worked with the Legal Aid Society. That's a great resource for anyone who's having issues with their leave rights. But nonetheless, I work with the Legal Aid Society to confirm that my understanding was correct. And so with them, long story short, got the leave that I was entitled to. And then after that whole experience, I realized that I could not be the only employee in California or anywhere else that had this much of a hard time figuring out your leave entitlements. And because of that, I started a blog where it was just kind of blogging about my understanding of maternity leave rights in California, state benefits in California. And then somehow that blog kind of went viral. And then through that experience, I then started a Facebook group where I basically helped individuals kind of navigate California leave as well as paid benefits. And then after a certain point, when my second daughter was born, around in 2016, I was like, gosh, I think I can make a business out of this. I love helping people. So for a while now, for a couple of years, I was kind of helping people, for free, which is fine, which I loved. But I realized, wow, I think I can make a business out of it. And so that's when I formally started Maternity Leave 411, where again, I help, individuals maximize and navigate their leave rights. Before I started the company, I did get certified as a disability leave management specialist. And so I thought that was important to just, to have the training and kind of the background and the credentials, to really be able to help people. And so I started my company. I started Maternity Leave 411 in 2018, and I've been helping hundreds and hundreds of employees and employers since. And it's been a really awesome journey, especially since was born out of my own passion. And that passion certainly has not burned out.
That is incredible. At like the highest level, it feels like your motherhood experience catapulted you into helping other mothers, non-birthing parents too, to learn about their leave rights. It's another case where I feel like I talk to a lot of moms out there, and the transformation into motherhood has just catapulted, pivoted their career in some profound way. And a lot of times it's to help other moms and other parents out there. And it's just powerful to me. So that's my emotional sidebar. So should we dive into the California leave
Yeah,
space?
absolutely.
Okay. Pretend I know nothing and give me a broad strokes overview, and then I'll kind of pepper you with questions as I see them.
So in California, there are two leave laws that come into play. Number one, California Pregnancy Disability Leave. The acronym for that is typically PDL. And the second law that typically comes into play in the context of parental leave or maternity leave is the California Family Rights Act, and that is often acronym CFRA. In order to be eligible for these laws, you have to meet the requirements. And for California PDL, the only requirement is that you work for an employer with 5 or more employees. That's it. That's the only requirement. There's no requirement that the individual has worked for the employer for a certain number of months or hours. So if someone started with company A and on their first day of the job they were pregnant, they would be eligible for California PDL, provided that that company has 5 or more employees. In order to be eligible for California CFRA, you have to work for an employer with 5 or more, have worked for that employer for at least 12 months, and have worked at least 1,250 hours within the past year. And then in terms of what these laws provide you with, California pregnancy disability leave, that would only be applicable to the birthing parent. But what that California PDL provides is up to 17.3 work weeks of unpaid but job protective leave for the time that you are out of work due to pregnancy, childbirth recovery, and other related conditions. Now, I think a lot of misconception is that great, 17.3 weeks, that's a long time, but you don't automatically get all 17.3 weeks. Instead, the actual duration of one's pregnancy disability leave period is limited to the time that that person is actually disabled by pregnancy and childbirth. And so not everyone is going to be disabled for the exact same period of time. Someone might have had a friend who was out on maternity leave for a really long time because they had post-birth complications, and then they might have had another colleague who went out on maternity leave very early because they had pregnancy complications.
And so how do we define disabled?
Good question. Basically, it's your doctor that defines disability. And there is a bit of a standard that California doctors that they go by. In California, most doctors will deem you disabled by pregnancy as early as 36 weeks, and that's just by being pregnant. There's no requirement to have a pregnancy complication in order for doctors to deem you disabled at 36 weeks. Anything prior to 36 weeks will require a pregnancy complication. And then once you start your pregnancy disability leave period, if you have a vaginal delivery, that period of disability will continue for 6 weeks after the vaginal birth, or if you have a C-section, 8 weeks after that C-section. But you get 17.3 weeks of California PDL, job protected time. So if something happens and you're disabled beyond that standard duration, then all your OB or your doctor would have to do is certify an extension on that disability period, and your job will continue to be protected for up to that max of 17.3 weeks under California PDL. And then going on to the second leave law, CFRA, once the birthing parent is recovered from childbirth, then they are then eligible for California CFRA for baby bonding leave, and that provides an additional 12 work weeks of job protective leave for baby bonding purposes. And I think an important thing to note is that, I've had a lot of clients where their employers think that CFRA begins when baby is born. That's absolutely not the case. In the context for birthing parents, the 12 weeks of CFRA don't begin until PDL ends. And I think that's where a lot of employers might get tripped up, and that's how they shortchange their employees of maternity leave, because they are starting that 12 weeks of CFRA at birth as opposed to when that employee is recovered from childbirth.
Okay, so am I simplifying it right where the PDL think disability, that is because you are growing and birthing a human, like
Correct.
that is for the birthing parent.
Correct.
And then the CFRA equals baby bonding leave, and that is because you have welcomed a new child into the home, and us as a society or California as a state says you deserve this time to bond with the baby.
Correct.
Cool. Okay, got it. And then to go back to the disability definition, postpartum depression,
Mhm.
does that get incorporated? Is there a standard unspoken or spoken?
Sure. Yeah. So the California PDL, there's no list of pregnancy related disabilities in the laws, right? And at the end of the day, it's decided and determined by your OB. And as long as your OB or doctor, it doesn't have to be an OB, I should clarify that, but as long as a doctor has certified that your disability, if that you have a disability due to pregnancy, childbirth, or other related conditions, that disability would be protected under the California PDL. Post birth, a common example would be something like postpartum depression, which can be common for a lot of mothers. Pre birth, a common reason to have to go out on leave or miss work would be something like morning sickness. So, anytime you're away from work due to morning sickness, your job is protected because that's a condition covered under the law. As long as your doctor can say that the condition that you are experiencing, as long as that's pregnancy and or childbirth related, that would be protected and covered under the California PDL. In terms of duration and for how long an extension is going to happen, that's really going to depend on your doctor. I've had clients who've had doctors who are very kind of see a holistic view in regards to recovering from childbirth, and they've been more flexible and amenable to providing a longer leave extension, whereas unfortunately some other doctors are less so. But I always tell my clients, definitely don't be shy to advocate for yourself. If you're feeling less than 100%, definitely speak to your doctor about getting a disability extension. Typically, OBs will schedule a post birth appointment at around that 6 week mark, 6 weeks post birth mark. And I always tell clients that that's a great time to discuss any complications that you're having. I think the medical standard of either 6 weeks post vaginal birth or 8 weeks post C section, whoever made that medical standard clearly did not have a child because I had two C sections. I certainly was not recovered after 8 weeks. It's the recovery process is so much longer. Just within the years that I've been doing this, even just within the past 2-3 years, I'm definitely seeing more flexibility from physicians and doctors on realizing that 6 to 8 weeks post birth is not enough time. And so that's why they're being more amenable to that disability extension. Your job is protected. So, like I say, don't be shy to advocate for yourself, advocate for your health of yourself, your baby, your family members, and get that disability extension.
That's a great reminder, that I think a lot of moms need to hear is to advocate for themselves. So, it's interesting that it comes back to that, and I'm guessing that that's, a lot of the work that you do with your clients.
Exactly. Yeah. I think that, when, when I first talk to my clients about what their leave timeline duration looks like, when PDL will begin and end, and when CFRA bonding will leave and end, pre-birth, it all looks pretty self-explanatory. But once you start your leave, things change. The leave timeline that I might give to my clients pre-birth could look totally different once they're in their leave because your leave will change based on real time events, when and how you have your baby, disability extensions, things like that. And so it's just really important to kind of have the support either of people like myself or HR representatives to really kind of provide that ongoing support to their employees, to making sure that their leave is being administered properly, and not shortchanging them, especially if someone is having post-birth complications. That's such a vulnerable time, and so to really support them, to allow an employee to maximize their leave, so that they can get the proper care that they need, I think is so important. That's what really excites me and really motivates me, with the work that I do, to be able to help someone going through struggles, and kind of giving them the gift of time, right? Helping them navigate and helping them maximize their leave, extend their leave so that they can fully recover and be there for their families.
I love that, giving them the gift of time. Yeah, that's beautiful. Reminds me of a continuous debate that I think a lot of moms face is time versus money. Talk to me about the PDL and the CFRA and the money tied or not tied to those two.
Yeah, so both of these leave laws, California PDL and CFRA, they protect your job. So by law, the employer has to protect an employee's job while they're out on those leave of absences. However, there's no legal requirement for employers to pay an employee out on California PDL or CFRA leave. So what they would have to do is utilize wage replacement programs that they might be eligible for during their leave. During the disability portion. So, in the context of maternity leave, while someone is out on California PDL leave for their pregnancy and childbirth recovery, there's typically, let's see, I'm counting out loud, four options in terms of pay. Number one is state disability insurance, California state disability insurance. In order to be eligible for California state disability insurance, you have to be paying into California SDI taxes on payroll deductions. Not every employee does. So that will, take away anyone who is, a contract worker, a 1099 worker might not be eligible for California SDI taxes. State and public employees, so teachers, people who work for the government also might not be eligible for California SDI benefits, and so that's a big bummer. So in addition to California SDI or California benefits, using accrued time, PTO, vacation, etc. Another option for wage replacement is employer paid benefits. A lot of times, or not, I wouldn't say a lot of times, some employers will provide a kind of a benefit to their employees where they might provide some sort of, parental leave or maternity leave benefit to their employees that are going out on leave for those purposes. And then finally, another option would be private short-term disability policies. This is outside of California state disability insurance, but especially if you're not eligible for California SDI taxes, this is certainly something a birthing parent should look into. So a lot of policies, Unum, AFLAC, policy providers, insurance providers like those companies, they will provide a short-term disability policy where they can essentially pay a premium and then cash out on benefits should they be disabled and can't work because of their pregnancy disability. And then changing gears to baby bonding paid benefits, same deal. There's no legal requirement for an employer to pay someone while they're out on bonding leave. So an employee will use wage replacement programs that you're eligible for. The first one is state benefits. So in California, an employee is eligible to receive California paid family leave for baby bonding benefits. It's only 8 weeks. And then also you can use accrued time, such as PTO, vacation, sick. Or lastly, it would also be an employer paid benefit. So some employers will provide, paid bonding benefits to their employees going out on bonding leave, but not all employers do that. And also, as we discussed, not all employees are eligible for California PFL by virtue of them not paying into that California SDI tax.
I can see why it's a puzzle. Holy moly.
It is.
Okay.
There's a lot of intermix, right? when you look at maternity leave, whether it's in California or anywhere else, there's kind of two components. The first component is leave laws, how your job is protected. And then the second component is paid wages, or how you're going to pay yourself while you're out on leave. And it's just kind of the interplay of leave laws and how you're going to get paid. And it's really just kind of a puzzle, kind of fitting everything together, and how which paid leave policy fits into the leave law that you're on. And so it's really just kind of figuring out all the pieces and putting them together to kind of get a comprehensive maternity leave or parental leave plan.
Yeah. I'm like writing notes here and lots of acronyms, and I just can see why people are confused. And so to have you with all this insight is just incredible. So, um question, when you are working with your clients who are individuals, so not the HR folks, do you feel that they lean towards wanting the most time off versus they want the most pay? Like, was it 50-50? Like, do you know what I'm asking there? Like, what's their goals typically?
Absolutely. It's a mixed bag. It's really 50-50, and it's a unique situation and an individual preference, right? Clients who are in a position where pay is not, and I don't want to say important, every pay is always going to be important to everyone, but where they have the flexibility where they might not need paid leave for the entirety of their leave, they just want more time at home. Whereas I have other clients who definitely need, that paid time. And in California, in a very typical situation, there's typically going to be 4 weeks of job protected but unpaid leave. Some clients might take that unpaid time because they don't care, they just want to be at home with their children or their babies. But other clients, they can't take that unpaid leave time, understandably. And so what they'll do is they'll go back to work, so that they can make a wage as opposed to staying out on unpaid leave.
It makes me feel that most parents would choose more time if they could financially swing it.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's hard. And I think that even in a situation where, you might be higher paid, the issue that I see a lot with my clients is that with California state disability insurance benefits, there's a ceiling of $1,620 per week. And you will hit that ceiling of $1,620 a week if your annual salary is anything higher than around 141,000. And so if you're a higher wage earner earning say like 200K a year, you're still you get stuck at that ceiling of 1620. So even though prior to birth, prior to leave, you were making a very comfortable wage, once you're out on leave, if you get stuck at just 1620 per week, and that's not going to work for that individual family, because at the end of the day, finances and budgeting is, very much dependent on the family scenario. But despite making a higher wage prior to leave, once they go out on leave and they only get 1620 a week, that's a big hit, for a lot of people. Yeah, so educating families on kind of what the limits are, how you can, what the minimum amount that you can get from the state, how your employer's paid leave benefit might be able to top up what you get from the state, how you can use accrued time to top up what you get from the state. And of course, if you don't have any of that, and even though you have job protective leave, if the entire time is going to be unpaid, then it's very important for families to know that in advance. It's shocking how often someone will go out on leave and have this like, oh my gosh moment of like, I'm not eligible for any type of paid leave other than say my, accrued vacation PTO time, which they might only have like, I don't know, 10 days of. And it's a heartbreaking experience, to go through that motion with the client and have them realize that they are just not going to get paid during their leave. And so, doing as much research ahead of time so that you can plan accordingly during your leave is so important.
It's interesting. I wholeheartedly agree that my journey into motherhood has it's obvious that kids are expensive, but the direct impact through pregnancy and through leave and the pay impact, like I truly got it now that I'm 10 months postpartum, and it's just it's connected so many dots to me. And so I feel like it is really imperative, if that is the current landscape, and we could talk about legislation changes and big picture changes, of course, but if that is the reality of the landscape today, preparing is essential, and knowing that you don't have these pay options, or you do, or this is the ceiling, and so this is the hit you're going to take. I mean, a lot of times you're taking a, I don't know, $20,000 hit,
Yeah.
maybe. I
Yeah.
mean, personally, so yeah, it's super interesting. So I'm wondering, do you feel like that's a direction that you're going with your clients, of like helping birthing parents prepare even before they're expecting?
That's a good question. Yeah, I feel like I'm getting a lot more inquiries from parents that are just scratching the surface on family planning, figuring out, what they might be eligible for even before they're pregnant. And I think that's so important because, maternity leave, parental leave, it's very much kind of dependent on how long of a leave you can get, is really much dependent on how long you've been with that employer. You have to, in order to be eligible for the full gamut of maternity leave or parental leave in California, you have to be with that employer for at least 12 months. And so, because of that, before you're pregnant, if someone is thinking about changing jobs, that's definitely something to consider before they start trying. And yes, I'm definitely getting a lot more inquiries from folks who are not yet pregnant, and I think that's so great. I love when I get those inquiries to so be proactive, about their leave rights is pretty cool. And coming from somebody
Yeah,
who's super type A, love that.
same. The type A's unite. Um, yeah, and I think it's also reflective of the high cost of children. My mind goes to the childcare crisis and all that kind of stuff, that parents really want to be purposeful
Mhm.
when bringing a child into this world, and making sure that they are financially stable when they do so.
Yeah,
And that's a wonderful thing. So
yeah.
let's try to empower that. Yeah.
Mhm.
Interesting. Okay, so we talked a lot about the California leave overview. Is there more? I'm nervous to ask. Is there more?
That is the basic framework of it.
Okay.
But the only thing I would add is, especially for the birthing parent, if you are, so the maximum amount of leave, job protective leave under California statutes is 29.3 weeks, 17.3 weeks from California PDL, and then 12 weeks from California CFRA. What I think is important to also discuss is that if say someone is still disabled by pregnancy and childbirth and other related conditions after that 29.3 weeks, they're not just, they're not going to be shipped back to work. There are other leave protections that are in play. Reasonable accommodation under ADA. The Pregnant Workers Fairness Act comes into play. And I think that's really important because I think the misconception is after you exhaust all PDL and CFRA, you have to go back to work when you're not fully recovered. If that's the case, definitely, speak to HR, speak to parental leave experts like myself to really, again, get more time and have that time protected so that you can, fully recover and not only be a good parent. You need to be happy and healthy in order to be a good parent, but also you need to be fully recovered to be a good employee. So I think it's kind of a win-win, on all counts.
Yeah, I'm so thankful that there's, passionate advocates like you out there that are helping folks in the midst of this. We need trusted allies during these vulnerable times.
Mhm.
Awesome. Okay, so let's talk about federal paid leave. If you are a mom, parent that are kind of watching the news, kind of in the activism, social media tunnels, you can kind of see that there's some rumblings happening for this. So would love to hear your perspective as somebody who is directly dealing with expecting parents through their leaves all the time. So what are your thoughts?
Gosh, we need it. We need it. And I think, it's not going to happen overnight, but I think the more noise and voice we put behind a push for a federal paid leave policy, I think is will really push that envelope. I mean, the US is one of 6 countries without a federal paid leave policy. That's wild to me. There are so many really thought provoking stats on why federal paid leave is important. I think just on the most basic level, right? I mean, financial security, the cost of childcare, the cost of just having a child in general is so expensive. And if you're in a state or there's an individual or an employee who is not eligible for any type of paid leave, I mean, they have to decide between staying at home and taking care of their health, their children, their babies, versus a paycheck. And I think that is, it's the reality, but for lack of better words, it's unfair. And also I think that there's really good stats around just kind of the maternal and baby health too. If there's a federal paid leave policy, you can be out on leave longer. You can, if that's the case, then you can, breastfeed longer if that's the path that you're going to take. You can take more time away, with your baby to take them to well appointments, vaccinations, etc. So it really just kind of snowballs from kind of the health perspective. But I also think I think a really thought provoking stat around paid leave is, I think a lot of times, employers will think, well, gosh, if there's a federal paid leave, they're never going to come back, but that's obviously not the case. And in fact, there's stats to prove that, like, if there is a federal paid leave, or rather, when someone is eligible for paid benefits, they actually go back to work. There is a higher likelihood that that individual will go back to work if they did have paid leave during their parental or maternity leave. And I think because of that, it's a win-win for all fronts: the mom, the child, the family member, even the employer. And again, I think it's going to take a long time. Well, hopefully not a long time, but we're not fully there. But if we put more muscle noise around it, hopefully it'll get passed.
Agree. I love the noise muscle. That's what we're here. That's why we're talking about it. So I gotta ask, like, why hasn't it happened yet? Are you familiar with the space and like why it hasn't gotten there?
Yeah, I just don't think, it's funny because I don't know the stats off the top of my head, but I think on both sides of the political, divide, both sides see it as an important thing.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
why we haven't then figured it out, that I'm not a political expert, so I don't have the answer to that. But what I do know is both sides think it's an important aspect, but we're, for one reason or another, we're not there yet. Again, I'm not a political expert, but of course I'd assume that there's always going to be like a little bit of like push and pull. And I hope that, despite a push and pull, I hope that whatever comes to fruition helps people. Anything is better than nothing, but um, I hope that families are going to be benefit from whatever comes about. I think about, for instance, like the federal FMLA. The 31st anniversary of the federal FMLA was just a couple weeks ago, and it was interesting because with the federal FMLA, 12 weeks of unpaid leave, but that wasn't necessarily the purpose of federal FMLA. Before it went into law, there was a lot of discussion around it having a paid component, longer leave, and then basically with the push and pull, a lot of the extra stuff got stripped away. And then all we got was 12 weeks of unpaid leave. And so that's what I'm hoping, that doesn't happen. And again, it's going to take time. It's going to take effort. One thing I am really pleased about is, because there is the conversation around federal paid leave has been in conversation, has been on the forefront. I'm hopeful that the advocates will do their job, and politicians will listen, Congress will listen, and we need something that really protects our families in America.
Yeah, I'm hopeful too. I'm very hopeful too, and I'm keeping my eye on it and seeing how we can help. I'm curious the impact on business owners. Like my mind goes to like small businesses and small teams, and I gotta imagine, like, yes, I fully support paid leave. At the same time, like, how does a business like maintain their business and maintain their margins while supporting that? Like, maybe I'm generalizing too much and I need to learn more about it, but it feels like large organizations typically, hopefully, have paid maternity leave or family bonding leave, and so it's the smaller organizations where it's actually a like the margins are smaller. I don't know. Is am I
Yeah, I think that's an important thing to recognize. And as part of the work that I do, I also help employers figure out, kind of cultivate and kind of develop a parental leave policy. And I have spoken to several very small companies, and I think again, it's very much a unique situation to the companies, what their bottom line is, what their finances look like. But if their employees, if they're receiving California paid benefits, let's say at 60%, the employer is then shelling out the remainder 40% to get that employee to 100%. They're certainly not providing 100% pay. And I think, with that, perhaps that might make that pill a little bit easier for smaller employers to swallow. That you're not providing 100% pay for, say, 8 weeks. You're providing 40% pay for 8 weeks. But beyond that, the time away from work, say an employee is out of work for, say, I don't know, 18 weeks during their leave. And that entire time might not be necessarily paid or partially paid by the employer, excuse me. But even though that employee was out for 18 weeks, think about what sort of loyalty that employee is going to have if that employer provided a paid leave policy. I think that really speaks volumes to for employees to kind of to kind of say, oh, my employer really values me. They value me as a parent because they're giving me this paid leave policy. And so if they're going to go back to work, then that, I think, in my opinion, I think that is a huge benefit to employers. So having an employee out of work for 18 weeks at 40% pay versus that employee just having to quit their job because they can't be out on unpaid leave, that's kind of that push and pull that a lot of employers will have to kind of figure out. But I do think that there is a big benefit for employers to provide paid leave from a retention perspective.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes a heck of a lot of sense. So, thank you for that. Okay, so Akiko, thank you so much. We have covered a lot of ground today, and you clearly are so knowledgeable in this space. So I can't thank you enough for joining us today. So let's make a cheat sheet for those listening. So can we go through and give me what is the acronym, what it stands for, and what does it mean to those expecting parents?
Sounds good. Yep. So, California Pregnancy Disability Leave, PDL, that is for the birthing parent. You get up to 17.3 work weeks of unpaid but job protective leave for your pregnancy, childbirth recovery, and other related conditions. While you're out on PDL, you can get wage replacement either from the state, accrued time, or an employer paid benefit. And then there's California CFRA, California Family Rights Act, that provides 12 weeks of unpaid job protective leave for baby bonding purposes. And while you are out on CFRA leave, one might be eligible for California paid family leave benefits.
If you are currently expecting or just looking to plan ahead, check out perkyleave.com to learn more about your leave benefits.
Moms with Benefits is chasing financial and emotional stability for motherhood.
If you've resonated with any of the stories from our moms, we'd love for you to give us a rating and quick review to help spread the word. You'll also find Moms with Benefits on Instagram at momswithbenefits.org. Keep going and keep growing, Mama.